Welcome, football fans, to another edition of IDP Plus Injuries. I'm your host, the DGen Doc, aka Sebastian Fearon, here at his right, physical therapist by trade in the U.S. Army. There's a quick flash of the credentials. As I always say, you probably don't care, but here's a little bit of that validation showing you I do know what I'm talking about a little bit. If you want to learn more about all those crazy letters after my name, feel free to check out the intro episode. I said I'm only going to say kind of go through it once because I know most of you don't care, but basically been studying injuries, rehab, and really football my whole life. So that's kind of what I'm talking about. The NFL in particular, that is right, the National Football League, the granddaddy of them all. Look, folks, it is, we're getting close to all that 100-day mark away. OTAs are starting up. It is truly turning towards football season. All this basketball, hockey, baseball, all these sports that we act like we care about when football's over. Yeah, we can start going back to actually focusing on the main thing. And that's the NFL. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is the NFL offseason injury update. This is actually the last episode of this series because it's episode 8. And the way we broke this down is there is a bunch of major injuries going into the 2024 NFL season. These are big injuries on offensive, defensive side of the ball, both sides of the ball, because we talk all sides of football here at IDP Plus. And these are the biggest injuries. We broke them down. There was a ton. So the best way to break them down was go ahead and do it by division. So we broke them down each division, and it's episode 8. So that means there's only 8 divisions in the NFL. This is the last one. And don't worry, folks, I saved the best one for last. Now, clearly biased, as you can tell by my garb here, my Giants gear. But we're talking about none other than the NFC East, the NFC Beast, as some may call it, the best division, in my opinion. The only one where each team has actually won a Super Bowl. Although up until 2017, I would have been I believe 2017, not 2019. I wouldn't have mind that not being a thing with the Philadelphia Loser Eagles not having joined that camp. But unfortunately, that dark day did happen. So, hey, we can say we've all won a Super Bowl, at least one. Don't worry, Philly, you've only won one in case you need a reminder. So, as you can tell, as a New York Football Giants fan, I saved this episode to last because this is the one I'm most interested in, the division. I will be unbiased in my injury analysis and as we break down all the injuries and tell you about player outlooks and things like that. However, that being said, if you aren't Eagles, Giants, or Commandos / Redskins / football team / whatever the hell they're going to call you next fan, just know I'm may not say the nicest thing about your players, but don't worry, you're going to get the information you need. I will be unbiased as we talk through some of these injuries here. So if this is your first time joining, the way this works is I'm going to break down the injury first. We're going to talk through, again, the major injuries that are going to impact this NFC East going into next season for 2024. So these are guys with known injuries from last season coming into this season, again, who are having to fight their way back. So that with this offseason update. So we started in the AFC. We went from all the way from episode 1 all the way up until this point. So this, again, has been the last division. So at this point, you should have heard about every major injury going into the season after this episode. Again, of course, as always, if you want to know more about a specific guy or someone I didn't talk about, just go ahead and comment and let me know, and I will give you a video, give you a write-up, whatever you want to know. So without further ado, let's get into this damn thing. And we're going to start with none other than the classic ACL tear. That is right. The anterior cruciate ligament is a major stabilizing ligament in the knee. It prevents your tibia, which is the lower, bigger bone there, from translating forward, from moving forward on your femur there. So really, it, again, is a stabilizing ligament, really, especially in dynamic movement, helps when you're cutting, decelerating, things like that. When it's torn, a very common sign is instability. The person will fall or feel like they have to fall when they're trying to stop or cut or move and things like that because they just don't have the stability, right? So that is what that ligament does. When it is torn, especially in the NFL, it's going to require surgery. As much as I'd love to be able to just exercise you to death and put it back together again, that's not how that works. You will need surgery because it's fully torn. So that surgeon has to go in there and repair that ligament. Now, if you're, an average kind of person and you don't have aspirations of winning a Super Bowl, you could live without your ACL. I mean, even Heinz Ward did play in a Super Bowl without an ACL. It is possible to be what we call a coper, but for these guys, they're all going to get mostly all of them are going to get the ACL repaired because they got long goals as far as athletically, and it just allows you to do a bit more than if it was not repaired. You can get rid of some of that instability. Should hopefully get rid of all of it, but as we'll talk through. So it is a major injury, right? It takes about 10 to 12 months of recovery timeline. You'll hear 9 months get thrown around. 9 months is always a little bit early for me. If a guy tries to come back around that 9 month, especially earlier than 9 month mark, there's significant re-injury risk. So typically I like the guys to at least have 10. So the first guy up who we're going to talk about that is none other than Mr. Jones. That is right, Mr. Daniel Jones, my quarterback number one, maybe going to the year. The ups and downs of Daniel Jones and his career. For what it's worth, I will say I don't think he's been given the best situation. Actually, I think he's been given one of the worst situations out of any quarterback to succeed. But I definitely, like most logical Giants fans, need to see a lot more from Daniel Jones. But he tore his ACL. This was just a season to forget. After having his best season of his career the year prior, taking us to the playoffs, getting a road playoff victory against the Minnesota Vikings, all only to get their I'm not even, just get beat down by the Philadelphia Eagles for the third time that season. But we don't want to look back too far. But Daniel Jones had a rough year. Really was hurt from like the get-go, and then he was coming back from a neck injury, and where he awkwardly got tackled here against the Raiders, and then he tried to play another snap and played off, and then he literally took the snap and just went down because it was that instability. He couldn't stand up on his leg because that ACL was torn at that point. So Jones tore that was November 5th of last season, 2023. So he's looking about a 10-month recovery timeline. So I said 10 to 12 months is typically what I like to see. Now, there is usually a performance dip from year one as far as the first year after the injury, because it's a big injury. You got to relearn you have to relearn how to walk, and then let alone run and play the game of football. And some of those neural patterns, neural patterns, so neuromuscular control, movement patterns can take up to 2 years to come back, per the research. So, running backs and wide receivers are really hit the hardest by these injuries. Quarterbacks actually tend to do fairly well. Obviously, they're not as reliant on their legs, as reliant on that dynamic stability of cutting at full speed. But as we all know, Daniel Jones, Mr. Vanilla Vic, as we call him there in New York, he is mobile. So that will definitely affect that part of the game there. He's going to be limited in his mobility. And, with him having 10 months, there's a shot he returns for the start of the season. But I would not be surprised if the Giants, they brought in Drew Lock, who, I don't know. Is he better? Is he worse? That's kind of a coin flip in my opinion. But they brought him Drew Lock. Please, for the love of all that's holy, don't roll out Tommy DeVito. I'd rather you throw out the Nathan Rourke guy. But I think it's not like Daniel Jones is head and above better than Drew Lock right now. And I think it'd be smart for the Giants to kind of let Lock get the start, and then let Jones roll in maybe week 3, week 4, something like that. But with the 10-month mark, he does have a shot to go ahead and be the starter. I just think with him, he's going to be taking it up right up until the season as far as getting back to being 100%. So I think Locke is definitely going to get a lot more of the snaps in OTAs and going into the offseason. So it kind of would logically make sense for Locke to go ahead and step in at QB1 for at least the first couple of weeks, which as a Giants fan, just get the ball to Wando Robinson and Malik Neighbors and, chuck and pray to Jalen Hyatt. But, that's not exactly the quarterback situation I want to go into the year. But, I think Daniel Jones will be able to play next season. I think he'll be able to play, within the first 4 weeks. Whether they roll him out there is a little bit of a different story. I think that's a little less injury, a little more, what are we going to do? But they did pay him a shit ton of money, and they got to pay him at least through this season. So I do expect Daniel Jones to be the starter for the majority of the season for the New York Football Giants. As far as his outlook goes, I mean, the offensive line should be improved, but it's one of those things you got to show me. You got to show me. But with the healthy offensive line, I think that he could have a fairly decent year, but we're just not going to see that rushing upside as much early on for the fantasy aspect. So, not someone I'm really going out of my way to get fantasy wise, as much as it pains me to say as my quarterback. But I do think he, especially by week 4 and on, I think he could have a good shot of being a productive NFL quarterback. And even so, he's not a guy who puts up a ton of numbers anyway, especially through the passing game. So I think we could see him return to an efficient level, but nothing crazy. I'm not calling for a career year there for Daniel Jones. All right, next guy up. We're going over to Dallas to talk about the Cowboys, the We Them Boys, right? America's quote unquote team, which, I think is bullshit. And honestly, it should just be the U.S. Army Black Knights, go Army, beat Navy. But, that's just my opinion. Very biased opinion. But we got Trevon Diggs, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Definitely one of the most productive as far as interception return for touchdowns. He will get burned and beat because he takes chances, but hey, that's how they play in Dallas. They're an aggressive defense, so he does fit in well for them. He also is coming off a torn ACL. He tore his ACL a little bit earlier in the year during practice, actually. So he's looking at close to 11 months of recovery timeline. Puts him a little bit more in that sweet spot there. Really, I like when guys are 11 and a half months plus. Obviously, 12 is even better. But 11 months gives me some good confidence that he should be ready for week 1, barring any, setbacks, which is definitely possible. There is a little bit of a re-injury risk increase, not only to that side to re-injure and re-tear that ACL, but also to the contralateral ACL, to the other side ACL, the other leg, and the lower body in general. So it is not crazy to their injury risk is elevated to an extent. However, I do think that Diggs, as long as sticks to rehab, things go well, everything heals up nicely. I think he's got a shot to be the week 1 starter there for Dallas, and they're going to need him. They're going to need to rely on him. Opposite Bland there, so that definitely, as long as Diggs gets back healthy, which I think he will be, that's not exactly the cornerback duo I want to be throwing at all the time, because they're probably going to come away with 1 or 2 interceptions. That's just kind of how they're playing with their aggressive style. So a little bit more positive an outlook for Trevon Diggs with those 11 months. Again, I think a little bit slower start may be expected. When you don't play football for an entire season, you typically don't get better, right? You get a little rusty. It takes a little time, to get back to playing to the elite level that these guys need to play at to be successful. All right, moving along to another big injury here, but we're moving away from the knee. We're heading down south to the foot, and we're going to be talking about a Lisfranc injury. Yes, Lisfranc. It is a weird French word, but basically, for all intents and purposes, you could think about your midfoot, right? So kind of the middle of the foot, not quite your toes, not quite your heel, kind of in that middle part there. Between those carpal bones and metatarsal bones. Basically, it typically refers to around your second or third toe, which is just what? So your first toe is your big toe, and then you kind of go down. Your fifth toe is your pinky toe. So kind of that. It's not really your index. It's just your second and third digit there. It's typically where you'll see. So they call it a Lisfranc injury because it can be either a Lisfranc ligament tear or it could be a fracture. So you kind of see both of those in this example here that I have on the screen. And so both of them are going to require season-ending surgery. They're both major injuries that creates a lot of instability in the midfoot. You really can't even walk. It's very unstable. Definitely not safe to play on. So about an 8 to 10 month recovery timeline. So a long one for sure, not quite as long as your ACL and Achilles, but definitely want something that's going to end your season if you get it. Really anytime from training camp on. So the guy who's dealing with this is Philadelphia Eagles linebacker Nakobe Dean, former Georgia Bulldog there, and he's definitely a guy that has shown real flashes. Last season to start the year, that we all know that the Eagles linebacking core has been a big weak spot for that defense really for the past few years, and he really looked to shine He was playing really well. It was kind of making me nervous as a Giants fan. But one thing I'll say is, as they say, you're only good as your last game. And the last game the New York Giants played, they did beat the Philadelphia Eagles pretty handedly, pretty damn handedly actually in Week 18 there. But Nakobe Dean, yeah, he had this Lisfranc injury, and again, he's shown flashes. It's just his ability to stay on the field has obviously been in question as a young player. I believe going into year 3, he's really just had a hard time staying on the field. But when he's on the field, he's looked really damn good. A lot better than 50-year-old by age, by age of his body, Shaq Leonard, who they brought over, and definitely is absolutely washed up. He's been decimated. His career, he was great, and then just injury after injury after injury after major spinal injuries. Yeah, but anyway, getting back to Dean, with that Lisfranc injury, he injured himself in November, so he's got about 9.5 months of recovery timeline there. He was mid-November when he had the injury. So 8 to 10 months, really kind of on that nicer edge, closer to that 10 months where you'd want to be. So that does give Dean a good chance. There is some performance dip as far as the next season with these as well. So I can't really, the expectation for Dean to come in there and absolutely light it up those first month back, I think is a tall order. I think it may take him a little bit of time to get back to it, but definitely by week 6 and onwards, he should be good to go and kind of getting back into the swing of things. This is definitely a guy who has the potential to play a lot of snaps. Again, they're pretty damn thin at the linebacker core as far as quality players. He has shown that he can do pretty well. So, on the IDP front, I think this is definitely a guy that, assuming that people are scared off due to the injury and his, ADP, his value drops. I think this is someone that you can actually get a nice little steal with, because I think Dean is not only a really good player, but I think that, given the amount of recovery timeline he has, I think, again, from week 6 on, that he could be a really, really solid producer. All right, folks, we are 3 down. We're going to do 8 today. But as we're rolling through this, before we get into too much fun, I got to tell you about our sponsors, and I'm pretty jacked up to do it. Listen, we've got the Fantasy Football Expo. That is right, where all of us football fanatics come together in Canton, Ohio in August, and we talk ball and have a good time. It's definitely something I'm excited for. It'll be my first one. Hopefully everything goes well and I can come out there and get up there to Ohio. But if you didn't need another reason, we're going to give you one anyway. Join us Saturday, August 10th at the Brew Kettle next to the Pro Football Hall of Fame for a drafting extravaganza. For the first time ever, IDP Plus is hosting an IDP League. So go ahead and be part of history. The first IDP League there that's going to be drafted at Fantasy Football Expo. We're going to have the link in the show description. So make sure you get signed up today. Again, this is the debut of IDP Leagues at Fantasy Football Expo there in August. So get signed up. Come on out. And if you do, definitely stop by and say hello. Would love to chop it up and talk ball with you. In the same realm as far as draft season, we're going to talk about Trophy Smack. That's right. Our friends over at Trophy Smacks, go ahead and get in the game right now with Trophy Smack's gorgeous, beautiful draft boards, complete with player stickers so deep you couldn't possibly need them all. And for the first time, Trophy Smack has an IDP expansion pack for all of us defensive guys who talk real football. So that will be in the show notes as well. So if you want to listen, draft season is a special time. It's a fun time, especially when you have that, you make it a spectacle. You get the boys and the ladies, if you have it in your league, you get them together and, you go all out, have an experience with it, right? That's the whole point of fantasy football, to really just dive into it, make it an experience, make it fun, right? Bring the game to life. So Trophy Smack definitely helps you out there. And the last thing I want to tell y'all about is our friends over at Expedia. Look, it's getting hot. I'm in Texas right now. I think, it's getting up into the high 90s. I saw 100, I think, in a week or so. So it's getting hot. Summer's here, right? Summer is right around the corner, and that means vacation. You've been working hard all year. Make sure you go ahead and take you and the fam out for a nice vacation. And we're thrilled to help you with that, with our partnership with the one-stop shop for all things you need in the travel world, and that is Expedia. Expedia is, again, what everyone loves going on vacation, myself included, but one of the worst parts is trying to find the best deals without just spending so much time going from website to website, and they got 40 tabs open. And that's where Expedia comes in, and then that one-stop shop where everything is right there and you know you're getting the best price. So as an affiliate partner, the way that works is we have a special link that we're going to provide down below, and since you're a fan of us and we're a fan of you, we're going to give you exclusive discounts and all those good things. So check all of those things out in the show notes. And now we're back to football. So let's go ahead and continue talking about the biggest injuries in the NFC East. Quick hydration break. I think pretty sure cannot confirm, but I also think, halftime's a good time for NFL guys to sip on a little whiskey there, get a little loose, make sure you get the tongue loose to get everything going. So we're going to continue on here on this journey, and we're going to talk about some shoulder injuries. That is right. So we are talking some shoulder injuries, and we are going to talk about none other than, so we're going to talk about two guys here. Apologies, a little snafu on the pictures here. Yeah, there we go. Let's get those guys loaded up. So we're going to talk about two guys here who had some shoulder surgeries. Now, the tricky part about some of these injuries is that they don't always disclose exactly what the injury is. So we got to do a little bit of educated guessing. I heard a nice phrase over here doing an Army training for the lot. Thanks. It's been 10 weeks I've been in this damn hotel, but heard some, learned some good things. And one of those things is called swag. What is swag? No, it is not your typical sense of being cooler than everybody else. But swag is a scientific wild ass guess. Yes, if the Army's good for one thing, it's good for acronyms. But yeah, sometimes we got to swag it here and, take some educated guesses as far as what we're told, because the NFL definitely does a good job of usually telling us, giving us a pretty damn good clear picture, especially to other leagues like the UFL or college football, right? But they don't always disclose everything sometimes, especially for those not high profile players. So we have a shoulder surgery. Geez, hardest thing is I encourage you to try to say soldier and shoulder a lot of times. It's like just plays mental gymnastics in my head. But yeah, so right now what we're looking at is the shoulder complex. Specifically, it's looking at an AC joint tears and the different grades to it. The AC joint is your anterior or your acromioclavicular joint. So kind of right up in here, attaches your acromion, which is part of your shoulder, to your clavicle. Obviously, also part of that shoulder complex, but also connects to your chest there. So that is a type of shoulder surgery that can happen. Really grade 3 and above. Think guys like Anthony Richardson, or if you want to see an example that was not performed surgery, you can go look up Keenan Allen's busted up shoulder. So that's a type. There's also what we can do. They can go in and have a labral repair, or as far as a arthroscopy, where they go in and basically clean up the shoulder. So your labrum is that protective layer around the shoulder, that all around that kind of ball and socket that helps to limit friction essentially, and it kind of provides more surface area to really prevent that bone on bone action. So sometimes you can have a labral tear, and that can be a very painful injury. Sometimes it's a stability thing. So again, not exactly sure because they didn't disclose, but we do have timelines for both these guys. And both these guys have the timeline of about 4 to 6 months, which is pretty average with these shoulder injuries. 4 to 6 months is that kind of that sweet spot. And the nice part for this first guy, which is Washington Commanders for now, linebacker Jamin Davis, young guy. I believe out of Kentucky. He is coming off a shoulder injury, a season-ending one he suffered in December. Good for our news is he's got 8.5 months. So that, unless he's got some crazy rotator cuff surgery, which is unlikely, we would have probably known by now, just based on timelines and the information that would have came out, he should be good to go. I'm not super concerned. That's, again, well above that 6-month mark as far as what he had going on there. And again, his recovery timeline that was given out and that's been reported is closer to that 4 to 6 month mark. So Jamin Davis should be good to go for next year. Really don't have a ton of concerns as far as going into next season. Now, the other guy we want to talk about, there is a bit of concerns here, and that is young Cowgirls defensive lineman Mazi Smith, the Michigan Wolverine product. He was drafted last season in the first round by the Cowboys, and he played very, very little snaps. He did get game action in all the games, but he was not the run stopper kind of impact player that they thought he was going to be. There were some issues about weight and just kind of not fit into the system and things like that, but they were really kind of expecting him to step up in year 2 and get a lot more playing time and kind of be the guy they drafted him to be. And unfortunately, just a couple months ago while training in the offseason, he hurt his shoulder and had to get shoulder surgery. Now, again, they were given that 4 to 6 month timeline, but that gets a little more precarious for Smith because, with the injury happening in March, he only has about 5.5 months of recovery timeline. So, at that 4 to 6 month mark, yes, it's plausible that he may be ready by week 1, but he's going to get little to no reps. He's a young guy who has not got a lot of reps. He had problems with his weight. And what's really hard to do after surgery is get motivated to work out, especially when it can be a little painful and you can't do everything that you're used to doing because you have to follow some type of precautions and can't just go back to lifting heavy with that shoulder. So, yeah, I've got some concerns here, not only with the injury being late, but just also, he had some issues last season, again, with the weight, being productive. It's kind of hard to get into a good swing of things if you're not being able to participate in practice. So I think this is a bit of a tough injury for a guy who really needed this developmental time and to keep off the weight and stick to his kind of weight maintenance program. So, less so the injury itself as far as like the injury type and that super scaring me, but more so this situation gives me a lot more pause about Mazi Smith, especially for the first half of that season here of next season. All right, folks, moving on. We are now sticking in the upper extremity, and we're going to be talking about a thumb ligament surgery or a UCL likely ligament or what we call gamekeeper's thumb. So you do have, even though it's tiny, we do have ligaments in our thumb. And the most common one to be injured is your ulnar collateral ligament. So that just means it's on the inside, your ulnar side. So kind of think, medial to your body. A little bit hard to explain, but there's pictures for a reason, right? So basically one of the ligaments in his thumb was torn and he had surgery. And this guy actually, and who this guy is none other than Big Play Slay, baby. Mr. Darius Slayton, Giants wide receiver 1 for a couple years, really. Coming out of Auburn, 6th round pick who's been pretty productive for them. Struggled with a little bit of the yips early on in his career, but kind of really been solid for a couple years for them now. But it was revealed after the last game, that last game where the New York Football Giants handily defeated the Philadelphia Eagles. He got surgery pretty close after a thumb surgery. You can kind of see actually on his right thumb how taped up it is. I didn't even realize it until just looking at this picture here. That right thumb is the injured thumb, and he's got that big old pad that looks asymmetrical to the other side. That's pretty interesting. But yeah, this kind of makes sense because he got the injury pretty early on and he played through it throughout the entire season. He played all 17 games, so he played through this injury, and he got off-season surgery, which a lot of guys do in the off-season. So with this type of surgery where they can repair that ligament, it's about a 3 to 6 month recovery timeline. Again, since I don't know exactly what ligament, I'm just assuming the UCL because that's kind of the most common one. I'm giving a 3 to 6 month recovery timeline window. Again, there's variables that would change as far as if it's closer to 3 months or 6 months, but it would be very atypical for it to be, a 9 to 12 month process, right? So Darius Slayton, with doing it at the very end of the season, he's gave himself 8 months to get back to ready to go. They're in contract negotiations now. I don't foresee this being an issue as far as him going into next season. He obviously already played with the injury last season, and now the surgery is just going to go ahead and make that better and be repaired. So Darius Slayton, a guy who is a producer, and I think he's going to continue doing that next season. And not super concerned about this thumb injury at all. Another guy I'm not really concerned about, and we're going to talk about an MCL injury. So it's a medial collateral ligament, and similar to your ACL, your anterior cruciate ligament, it's a major stabilizing ligament of the knee. It's located on the inside part of your knee there. It prevents the knee from bending essentially too far inwards and getting too much valgus force. But if you are going to injure one of the ligaments in your knee, I don't encourage you to do that. But if so, try to make it your MCL, because it's the one that's going to have the best chance of healing and the quickest injury recovery timeline. So that's due to the vascularity in the area. It has a lot of blood flow. Blood flow just means getting nutrients to the area, so it helps to heal faster. So your MCL, when torn, there's different grades, right? So grade 1 is like a minor micro tear. Grade 2 is a little bit more of a partial tear, and grade 3 is kind of your full tear. But even, in worst case scenarios, your player is typically not out for that long. And in this case, you're talking about Mr. AJ Brown. As you can see, that is him fumbling the ball, and then he did proceed to get tackled and get injured. And probably in one of those hip drop tackles where their league is apparently outlawing, which that's going to be an absolute just cluster next season. But anyway, unfortunately for Brown, it was the last week of the season where he got injured, and he wound up missing that wild card game, playoff game. The fact that he even had a chance, and what tells me that was probably, grade 1 or grade 2, which in the worst case, grade 2 would be 4 to 6 weeks. So really, really, really not something I'm concerned about. As far as, the Eagles just gave him a contract extension. They're not really obviously concerned about it as far as affecting next season. So, I would expect Brown is ready to go at this point, fully healthy. Really nothing that should give you pause there as far as the injury. I know he ended. It's always when you see the questionable, go look at the depth charts, you see the Q next to their name. You're like, oh man, wait, he's injured, or shoot, I forgot. Yeah, he didn't play last season. Yes, I get it, but this is not really a significant long-term injury. So no red flags or issues there for Mr. AJ Brown, other than the fact that he plays in the worst city in the world. Well, maybe tied for Dallas for the worst, but injury-wise, AJ Brown should be good to go. All right, folks, the last one for the NFC Beast, NFC East, and it's a gnarly story. So we're talking about another UCL tear, but instead of in your thumb and your elbow, so your ulnar collateral ligament, you got them in your one in each thumb and one in each elbow, right? So it's on that medial side, and it is kind of that stability piece. And this is really one of those injuries where you see a lot in baseball. This is where the Tommy John surgery came. Tommy John was the player who famously kind of injured it and tore that ligament, and then he got what's called a Job procedure, because that's the name of the surgeon, because surgeons are cool and they get to name stuff after themselves, who was able to actually, have a really nice procedure to reconstruct that ligament, and in a lot of cases, get it to where it's almost stronger than what it was before, as you see. But you typically see it with pitchers. Sometimes quarterbacks have an injury similar due to that overhead throwing motion. But in this case, it was to none other than a nitty-gritty offensive lineman in Nick Allegretti. That is right, the guy who famously stepped in for all-pro offensive guard Joe Thuney with his pec tear, who I spoke about in the AFC West episode. So go ahead and check that out if you got questions there. But Joe Thuney goes down. You're going to then face the Ravens in the AFC Championship, and then the 49ers in the Super Bowl. Not really teams that you want to be playing with your backup offensive lineman, but they don't know Nick Allegretti, and they don't know how much of a monster this dude is. So much so that in the second quarter, his UCL popped. He has been quoted and said in interviews, like, I heard it pop. Like, his UCL fully tore in the second quarter. And he said, he took some time. Thankfully, it was 2-minute warning. He took some time to compose himself. They got him a brace. They basically told him, like, look, it's torn. It's not going to hurt or like get any worse. And he played all 79 snaps of the Super Bowl, with the majority of those snaps coming after this injury. So what an absolute monster and stud to even play through that. But, as far as that UCL, now, when you talk about Tommy John surgery with your pitchers and your quarterbacks and things like that, that's a lengthy recovery. That's close to like a year and a half. However, we're talking about offensive linemen. Offensive linemen don't really need to throw the ball downfield. I think if your guard is throwing the ball, you're kind of in trouble already. So in this case, I think the recovery timeline is going to be a little bit closer to that 6 to 9 months mark. It just has to be strong enough for him to kind of get some force, but it's really not something that's pivotal for his position. Obviously, if he was a pitcher or if he was a quarterback, we're having a completely different conversation as far as expectations going into the season. But with it being to an offensive lineman and the fact that he gutted through and played through it, this should be a lot easier for him to play through when he's got 7 months to recover. So he's got a good amount of time to be recovered and to get that bet healthy. Again, if he was having to go out there and throw, 100 pitches or chuck the ball around the field, different conversation. But the fact that he's an offensive lineman, he should be good to go for next season. And it's really just take a moment to, like, this dude played 79 snaps during the regular season. He played 79 snaps in the Super Bowl alone. And again, like, more than half of those were with a torn UCL. So where he was in a decent amount of pain, as he says. So shout out to you, Nick Allegretti, for being a true football guy. And shout out to you folks for making it through. That is right. We just talked about all the biggest injuries in the NFC Beast. That is right. We ran through the top 8 injuries heading into the season on offense, defensive, linemen, safeties, cornerbacks. We talk about it all here on IDP Plus. If it's important, if it's going to get you an edge in fantasy, if it's going to make you a better fan, or if it's going to make you some money with the sports books, we're talking about it. We love football here, and we know you do too. Hey, folks, listen. Like I said, this is episode 8. That means we've gone through now every division in the NFL. Cheers to that, folks. All 8 divisions in the NFL. We talked about the biggest injuries going into the 2024 season. That is going to be a wrap for this series here. Not for IDP Plus Injuries. Obviously, the injuries don't stop. They're just going to keep rolling as we get into OTAs and training camps, and we're going to learn about new injuries and things are going to happen. And it's going to be dynamic, and that's what I'm here for. But as far as your off-season injury update series, that is it. So please like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how you like the series. Let me know things you would want to see improved as we go into the seasons, things I should talk about, things I shouldn't talk about. Give me some feedback. Let me know if you enjoyed it, if you liked it, thumbs up, all of that good stuff. And again, check out the other episodes if you haven't already, to check out for all your biggest information going into the NFL season. But hey, I hope you guys are just as jacked as I am for football season. It's right around the corner. We're getting to that 100-day mark. We're going to be talking a lot more football in the coming weeks. But for now, that wraps up your NFL offseason injury update. And I'm Sebastian Fearon, and the DGen Doc is out of here.